on the next Dark Side of the Internet.
Ladies and gentlemen, here are your winners and the new tag team champions, Jared Priest and the Butcher!
Brian Hines, a man, technically, who at one time had a bright future. Considered one of the best ring announcers on the suburban Chicago independent wrestling scene, Brian was going places. Until he wasn't. What caused Brian to give up this low-paying career that allowed him to rub elbows with C-list wrestlers? I'll give you a hint. It rhymed with Banal Lawsome.
Basically, I was given a great opportunity, the chance to go for performing in front of 100 or so people for $30 a night, once a month, to reviewing comic books on the internet whenever I like. What no one told me is that I'd make a lot less money doing that and my audience would experience significant shrinkage. But no regrets. I long ago lost the ability to feel what you baseline humans call emotions after an irate wrestler pile drove me through a table for messing up his introduction. We still talk. He travels. He's happy.
What a schmuck. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, Brian Hines. I'm a huge fan of pro wrestling. I was into it a bit as a kid, but got back into it in the late 90s when I tuned into Monday Night Raw to see a Mankind versus The Rock promo. I've been hooked ever since. I've attended ECW, WWF, now E, and TNA pay-per-view events. I love wrestling. What I don't love is wrestling comic books. And let me explain. The WWF books that Chaos Comics put out back in the day were okay, but they generally told stories where the wrestlers were fantasy versions of their own characters. The more recent WWE comics by Boom Studios tried to play it more straight, but never really grabbed my interest. The problem is wrestling is all about visual entertainment, and it's hard for static or still images to convey the pure chaos and adrenaline from a wrestling match. Or so I thought. Then along came Daniel Warren Johnson.
Daniel Warren Johnson is an Illinois-based cartoonist best known for his webcomic Space Mullet, as well as releasing a bootleg Star Wars comic called Green Leader to some acclaim. After working on independent comic books, his breakthrough work was the DC Black Label story Wonder Woman Dead Earth, in which Princess Diana wakes up in an apocalyptic future and must protect what's left of humanity. From there, he worked on Beta Ray Bill for Marvel before launching his Image miniseries, Do a Powerbomb.
But whereas Chaos took the characters out of the ring and Boom took the fantasy out of the wrestling, Johnson serves up a tale of love, regret, and absolute determination in the confines of the squared circle, with fantasy, sci-fi, and dark magic elements throughout. This ended up being my favorite comic book of 2022, and I'm thrilled to share my take on it with you. This is my review of Do a Powerbomb! Issues 1 through 7.
U.S. Steel Rose is defending her Grand World Heavyweight title against Cobra Sun. Preparing for the match, U.S. spends time with her partner Jacob, daughter Lona, and brother Blood. Danny has to go to work, so Lona will sit with Uncle Blood in the audience for tonight's match. Her husband wishes her luck, and she heads to the ring to the deafening cheers of the audience. She cuts a promo. She once fought only for herself, but now she fights for her daughter, her family, and the audience at home, reducing Blood to tears. Cobra Sun comes to the ring, soaking in the booze. He is not in this for family, but for the money and power that he can get from taking that title belt. The match begins, and the wrestlers trade enziguris, palm strikes, and moonsaults.
Oh, that's an amazing shot. It really shows you what those moves look like from an audience perspective. At my very first indie wrestling show, a wrestler jumped off of the turnbuckle onto a group of guys at ringside, and this was right in front of me, though, as a few rows back. The wrestlers went into the folding chairs the fans were sitting in, and it was like a tidal wave of chairs came flowing at me and my friends as we jumped back. Now that I think about it, tidal wave of chairs would be a great name for the first album from a garage rock band.
As the match begins to ramp up, Cobra Sun lifts Yua to the top rope for his finisher, when his foot slips off the rope. He loses balance and drops Yua on her neck. As the champ is rushed to the hospital, one viewer smiles. In the ER, Lona remembers a bedtime story with her mother. Where do you go when you die? Well, that's a mystery, but Lona doesn't need to worry. Her mom's not going anywhere. At the ER, her father tells her her mother is dead. 10 years later, Lona is following in her mom's footsteps, but getting her butt kicked for doing so. She gets paid by her uncle, but he won't give her a permanent spot on the roster. She's self-trained and he won't train her, but he lets slip that he made a promise not to train her. She's confronted by her father outside the venue. He wants her to give this up, but she now knows that he made Blood promise not to train her. He just wasn't willing to risk losing her like he lost her mother. She lays into him. He's been a broken man since losing Mom, and they part badly. Watched by the viewer from earlier. The strange man approaches Lona and grabs her. They're both transported to a dark, hellish landscape complete with wrestling ring. His name is Willard Necroton. He's a necromancer, wrestling fan, and has an offer to make Lona, an offer that could bring her mother back to life. Necroton explains that he led a demonic uprising on a world but was defeated. His enemies then exiled him to this island. He can't leave, but can project his astral form across the dimensions, which is how he met Lona. Now, to pass the time, he's watched a ton of professional wrestling.
My mother was right. Pro wrestling is a gateway to hell. Oh my God, does that mean all the other things she told me were true? No, if that were the case, I'd be blind.
He witnessed her mother's death. The best thing about pro wrestling are the high stakes. Even higher than a championship is the life of a loved one. Lona is shown an image of her mother. She wins this tag team tournament. She gets her mom back. Lona tries to tell him that pro wrestling on her world is pre-scripted, but it doesn't take. She will need a partner, and there's only one man who might want this as badly as she does. Lona, ignoring a call from her dad, travels to a dingy but well-attended indie show. Cobra Sun takes on Kaneda the Destroyer in a brutal, no-holds-barred, falls count anywhere match. The two men wail on one another, and when it looks like Cobra Sun might win, he has a flashback to Lona, and the tables turn. Backstage, the promoter wants to use Cobra Sun in a better spot, but no, this is what he deserves. Lona approaches him. This will sound crazy, but he already knows about the necromancer. But she's too green, he won't tag with her. Lona can see it in how he wrestles. The guilt. Maybe they both can be free of what he did if they tag together. Later, she calls her father back. She'll be away for a while. Wrestling. He's never been able to discourage her from trying to fill her mother's boots. He asks her to be careful, then as he hangs up, stares at his Cobra Sun mask.
Oh, well, I can see how that... Whoa! Oh, my God! To think it was someone we knew all along behind that mask. Crazy, right? Ha! Indeed. Say, do they remember me, or is this guy wasted on them? I don't even know who you are. What chance does my audience have?
Jacob meets with Yuna's uncle Blood. He's mad she knows he prevented her from getting trained. Well, Blood hated lying to her. He also thinks Jacob should have told her that he was Cobra Sun. But both he and Yua felt that she was too young at the time to understand why her father was a bad guy or heel wrestler. And after her mother's death, it didn't seem to matter. Cobra Sun and Lona enter into the necromancer's world. They get registered and head to a bar. Lona wants to train, but Cobra Sun tells her just to let him handle everything. Then, a rival tag team gets peed on by a puppy because apparently cats were right. Hell is for dogs.
That certainly would have put a new spin on an old classic.
Don Bluth presents the movie classic about dead animals. All dogs go to hell. The tag team, FISO, recognizes them and mocks them. They heard that wrestling on their earth is fake. But before it goes too far, Sun and Steel are saved by their opponents in the tournament, Orangabang, brothers Nexel and Petey. They want Cobra Sun in the best shape they can be for tomorrow. They're fighting to bring back their dead sister, so they won't hold back. In their room, they don't know if they can do this. Everyone else thinks or comes from a place where the wrestling is real. But Lona knows they have no choice. They must do whatever it takes. The next day comes with Necroton welcoming them to the Death Life Tag Team Tournament. The rules are laid down and the tournament begins, with Nexel getting amazing hang time on a drop kick to Cobra Sun's face. He takes a beating but won't tag in Lona, even as Petey comes in on their side. They hit their finisher and are about to score the pinfall when Lona breaks it up. She screams at him, she won't lose this tournament because of him. Now tag her in.
Tag me in! Tag me in! I'm ready! Oh, wow. Now that you guys are much closer, he is a lot bigger than I thought. You've got this. You tagged my ankle? Well, great. Thank you for that. All right, Mongo, we're up.
Lona is in and goes at Petey hard. She knocks Nexel off and hits a moonsault for the pin. There's no real gloating, just a realization between competitors that they all share a sense of loss. As the tournament progresses, the Knights of Rhine defeat Pizza Party. They'll face Sun and Steel in the next round. We see them a year earlier. The Knights come from the very world that fought off the original army of Necroton. King wants Alphonse and Maximilian to win this tournament and resurrect the court wizard Velkus the Red. He alone can finally defeat Necroton. Training for the next match, Cobra Sun apologizes for doubting her. He mentions how he and her mother used to tag together. Lona wonders how that used to be. Well, it was pretty much perfect. They could practically read each other's minds, but he leaves out how that closeness may have led to something more between them. If they're going to win, it's time to start working on tandem moves. The match against the Knights is brutal, with Lona hitting a flying knee, but she's quickly overwhelmed by the strength of Maximilian. It seems all over when they go for their finisher, King Arthur's Table. But she kicks out. Lona takes a bad beating but stands on her 2 feet. She is Lona Steel Rose, daughter of Yua Steel Rose. She dodges Max, hits a clothesline of her own, and finally tags in Cobra Sun. Some quick tags in and out sees Lona hit a flying elbow as Cobra Sun neutralizes Alphonse. Sun and Steel win. They're leaving the ring as the next match starts. Faiso versus Puropak from Tokyo. Wait a minute, Lona realizes they're from her world. The man in yellow takes off his mask. Uncle Blood? They weren't the only ones on Earth Necroton offered this deal to, and he wants his sister back as well. But Faiso attacks him from behind, knocking out his partner. Blood fights valiantly on, but Faiso destroys him, eventually choking him out. But they refuse to release their chokehold and drop a leg on him, breaking his neck. In the dungeon-like medical ward, Necroton assures them that his doctors will be able to heal her uncle. Yua wants them thrown out of the tournament. Well, he can't do that. Then they'll get justice themselves. Sun and Steel challenge Faiso to a no disqualification match. We flash back to one of the Faiso wrestlers, Maggie. She's in the hospital with her very sick child. He doesn't have very long left to live. Back at the tournament, Faiso agrees to the match. Lona is scared about the upcoming pain. Cobra Sun tells her to push past it. The blood and pain are a badge of honor to get the victory. The match is set up with weapons aplenty, but the wrestlers decide to take a technical, delicate, almost ballet-like approach to
boot to the head.
Lona is about to go medieval on Maggie when her partner Frank hits a suicide dive. Cobra Sun hits the top rope helo on Faiso. Cobra Sun takes a beating as Lona climbs the ladder, hitting the senton bomb on Frank. Chains, chairs, thumbtacks all come into play. It's a bloody mess. Lona gets Maggie's chain and uses it on Frank. Faiso must come from a world where people have rubber spines, because after a superplex onto 2 chairs, Frank still kicks out. They go for their finisher when an enraged Frank begins ripping at Cobra Sun's mask. Dad? Maggie breaks a kendo stick off on Lona's back as Frank holds Cobra Sun. 1, 2, 3. Faiso has won the tournament.
Okay. That's not how I would have booked it, but then I would have booked Brock Lesnar to break The Undertaker's streak, so there you go. What do I know? I was just a ring announcer and independent booker for nearly a decade.
Flashback to Maggie and Frank. They've both lost a child and have been promised by the Necromancer to get one returned if they win the tournament. Necroton is about to declare them the winners when they decide to square off. They wrestle to the death. Survivor gets their child back. In a flashback, we see Blood has gotten Lona to bed, but blows up on Jacob, caught him small and leaving him alone with his grief. We then cut to a match where Cobra Sun has the crowd in the palm of his hand. He hits a shooting star press and turns it into a DDT for the win. Later, he's at a noodle shop with Yua. She's scouting wrestlers for her big league and wants to know his story. He's a second-generation wrestler following in his late dad's footsteps. She advises him to build a connection with the audience. They can always tell when a wrestler is holding back. As Faiso dukes it out, Jacob is looking after his daughter. Lona is loaded up onto a cart when Maggie comes crashing down on Jacob. Frank goes for a moonsault with Sun and Steel in his line of fire. Jacob catches Frank and takes him down with a tombstone piledriver. As they get Lona to the back, Frank and Maggie are doing their best to kill one another with a championship belt and a barbed wire necktie. Alone, Lona asks why he never told her. Jacob was afraid to let her know who he truly was, but she does know. He's her father. Necroton bursts in. He needs him in the ring now. Faiso has competed mutually assured destruction. Therefore, the default winners of the tournament are Sun and Steel. He takes him to the Resurrection Chamber. Lona is almost relieved that Jacob was Cobra Sun. She thought his resistance to her wrestling was because she could never be as good as Yua. It was more that he couldn't help her become that wrestler as he was hiding a part of himself away. But his daughter thinks that did him no favors. He became a troubled loner. Their relationship was almost dead. It's time to heal. A few I love yous later, and they enter the Necromancer's tower. The plan has changed. See, when he was defeated and in prison, he lost his necromancy. At best, he could bring Yua back as a zombie. Oh, he'd better find a way to make this right for his sake. Hey, it's okay, though. He's made arrangements with a superfan who is watching the tournament. He'd love to wrestle them in a 2-on-1 handicap match, and if they win, Yua is alive again. And of course he can bring her back. He's God. A brief flashback shows Cobra Sun arriving a bit late from a match, but he gets to meet his newborn daughter. Now, at Heaven's Gate Pro Wrestling, Sun and Steel will wrestle the Creator. Given new outfits, Yua asks if Cobra Sun wants to start the match. He sees her mother in her. She can start. What follows is an issue-long orgy of in-ring violence, double-team moves, single and tag-team moves, and even, dare I say it, blood. But by the end, the winner is...
Hi. I'm not going to tell you how this comic ends. Normally, I'm not shy with the spoilers on this show, but I really enjoyed this book, and I want you to get the same enjoyment out of it that I did. So I'll just say that the ending is pretty darn near perfect. Bittersweet, yet still satisfying. Well, what about the book as a whole? Let's take a closer look at Do a Powerbomb.
Do a Powerbomb is Daniel Warren Johnson's love letter to pro wrestling by way of a tournament that broaches multiple genres. The reality of our pro wrestling, sci-fi, fantasy, and even anthropomorphized animals of other dimensions. Set against that most ancient and painful of all experiences, loss. At the heart of this story is a broken family. And like any good wrestling drama, there's some twists along the way. Cobra Sun's true identity, Uncle Blood entering the tournament, and even an upset victory that we didn't see coming. Still, at the heart, we have a girl who misses her mother and has to deal with her dysfunctional relationship with her grieving father. She's fighting to fulfill a dream of living up to her mother's legacy. At the same time, Cobra Sun is consumed by guilt and a strong sense of self-loathing. He's desperate to keep his daughter away from something she should be great at. Still, he doesn't have it in him to walk away from the very thing that he loves, even after it costs him his wife. There's a lot to dig into with these characters. Also, as one-dimensional as the opposing teams could have been, Orangutan and Faiso are given great depth by the fact that they too are doing this tournament to get back someone they loved deeply. Faiso's combined origins gives these heel villains a surprisingly tragic backstory. And although the Knights of Rhine try to buck that trend, they come off as pretty one-dimensional. Again, I'm not going to go into the ending for this book, but I found it very satisfying. Not happy, not sad, but right. It felt right for the story I'd been reading. It felt like the end of a brutal hardcore match we just watched. We're all exhausted and spent emotionally, but we just want to bask in the glow of having witnessed and understood the story that was being told. To wrap this review up, let me just say, as much as I liked the story, I loved the art by Johnson. It's not overly realistic, there's a very definite style to it. It kind of reminds me of 80s anime. The characters all have extreme physiques and very expressive faces. Sort of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The art is really my favorite part of this book just because of how he captures the excitement and impact of pro wrestling moves. I know I keep coming back to that moonsault. As I said, it really reminds me of my own experience watching pro wrestling back in the day. He just catches the explosiveness and surprise of the moves in a way that makes your jaw drop. These are only made better by the sound effects and motion lines adding extra impact onto what we're seeing. On top of that, his design work on the alternate reality tag teams is so much fun, and even characters like the Necromancer and God itself look unique but at the same time are clearly inhabiting the same world. Johnson's art then tags in Mike Spicer's coloring and Russ Wotan's lettering. You've got three elements that are all amazing but never fail to work together to raise this comic book's art game as a whole.
And that's Do a Powerbomb, a love letter to pro wrestling dressed in a multiverse of genres, exploring how loss can both divide and unite loved ones. I give Do a Powerbomb, issues 1 through 7, 5 out of 5 stars. Well, that's it for now, my friends. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please check out my Patreon page and lay a smack down on the pledge button. We'll see you back here next time when I challenge for the YouTube Championship, only to find out I don't even have a ticket into the building. Until then, this is Comic Book Issues, and I'm your host, Brian Hines.